What do you do when the people who are supposed to believe in you only ever see your choices as mistakes? Stick with me. I'm Emma, as I return to the town I once loved, only to be reminded why I left. But this time, something's about to change, and no one's ready for it. This is a story about being overlooked, about holding on to a dream even when your own family rolls their eyes, and about what happens when the storm hits, literally and otherwise. I'm Emma Carter. I'm 32 years old. I run a tiny nonprofit in Asheville, North Carolina, mostly disaster preparedness, environmental training, things people don't take seriously, until they absolutely have to. It all started 4 days ago, as I turned off I-40 and onto the winding roads that led back home. The air smelled like pine and distant rain, the kind that lingers behind the Blue Ridge Mountains, before deciding whether to fall or drift on. My windows were cracked open, and I could feel the humidity curling into my hair, wrapping around the anxiety already tightening in my chest. I should have felt comfort. These hills were supposed to be home. But instead, my stomach knotted with every mile closer to my parents' house. Mom had called last week. "It's our 25th anniversary," she said. "We'd really like you to be there. Rachel's flying in from Charlotte." Of course Rachel was flying in. That's what people like her do. Successful lawyers with condos and a perfect credit score. People who never have to explain their job title twice. I took the last right turn and slowed as their house came into view. The same white shutters, the same red brick porch. Everything looked preserved in time, like someone pressed pause 20 years ago and never hit play again. I parked, killed the engine, and just sat there. The house had 2 porch lights. Rachel's side always worked. Mine flickered. Still did. Mom opened the door before I could knock. She didn't hug me. She just blinked fast and smiled in that too-tight way she always did when she wasn't sure how she felt about me being there. "Well," she said, stepping aside, "you made it." "Of course I did," I replied, forcing cheer. "Wouldn't miss the celebration." Inside, the house smelled like lemon polish and cinnamon, her usual company's coming combo. The dining table was already set. Napkins folded into tiny fans, everything symmetrical. Rachel's favorite flowers, hydrangeas, sat in a crystal vase. No one asked what my favorite flower was. As I carried my duffel up the stairs, I passed Rachel's framed law school diploma hanging in the hallway. Next to it, a photo of her shaking hands with the governor after some policy win. My room was exactly as I'd left it, except emptier. The bookshelves still held a few of my old environmental science textbooks, dusty and untouched. But the awards I won, the Regional Earth Guardian Medal, the Governor's Certificate for Youth Sustainability Leadership, were gone. In their place, a second photo of Rachel beaming with her firm's founding partner. I sank onto my old twin bed, the springs letting out a tired sigh beneath me. I didn't cry. I don't really do that anymore. But I did feel it. That familiar hollowness, the sense that in this house I'd always be the footnote. Dad wasn't home yet, but I could already hear his voice in my head. "How's the little charity going, Em?" He never used the word nonprofit. To him, what I did was a hobby, an idealistic distraction, not a real job. I tried to shake it off. I was here to celebrate, be civil, smile, survive. Downstairs, Mom was arranging hors d'oeuvres on a silver tray. She glanced at me and said, "Rachel just closed a big case. Made partner, did you hear?" I nodded. "She's bringing someone, by the way. A colleague from the firm." "Good for her," I replied. Mom looked at me like she was waiting for more. Applause, maybe? A comment about Rachel's dress size or how proud we all must be? I just picked up a cracker and walked away. Later that evening, I wandered out back to the garden. The sky had that strange purple tint it gets right before dusk settles in. Fireflies blinked lazily near the fence. I used to catch them in jars when I was a kid, thinking if I kept them long enough, I'd understand what made them glow. Maybe I still did that. Just with different things now: community resilience, disaster protocols, the quiet systems that hold people together when everything else falls apart. Back inside, I heard the front door open. Rachel's voice carried down the hall, polished, confident, the kind of voice that didn't flinch in courtrooms or family reunions. She hugged Mom. Then I heard her say, "Where's Emma?" Out back, I think. Rachel didn't come outside. I stayed there for a long time, watching the sky bruise into night, listening to the hum of cicadas and wondering, not for the first time, why it hurt more to come home than to be away. Tomorrow was the anniversary dinner, and if I had known what was coming, if I had known how quickly everything would unravel and how all the things they said I wasn't, strong, capable, necessary, would soon be the very reasons people survived, maybe I would have stayed out there under the fireflies just a little longer. Tomorrow's drizzle pressed the mountains into a gray silhouette as Dad's sedan rolled up to the Asheville Community Center. String lights inside trembled, gold against the gloom, and the mingled scent of roasted chicken, buttered rolls, and lemon floor polish clung to my throat. I balanced a crate of hydrangeas, Mom's idea of elegance, and followed the echo of laughter through the lobby. A squeal outside announced Rachel's arrival. My shoulders tensed before I even saw her. Balloons shimmered against ceiling vents. At a makeshift photo booth, Dad posed beneath a banner reading Robert and Linda, 25 years strong, pride straightening his spine. He spotted me, offered a half thumbs up, no warmer than what he'd give a passing waiter. I smiled back, feeling 12 instead of 32. "Emma, darling," Mom slid beside me, cheeks high with excitement. "Rachel's new plaque from the Bar Association just arrived. Could you set it on the display?" "Sure." I placed it front and center beside framed vacation snapshots. My own environmental awards were nowhere in sight. Soft jazz floated overhead, the kind meant to fill silences without asking questions. I trimmed flower stems with the pocket knife I keep for trail work, amused that survival gear had become party decor. Cousin Sarah bounced in, twin cameras jangling. "Your nonprofit, still going strong?" "We just trained 60 new volunteers." "Sarah, photo of Rachel and Jonathan." Mom's voice sliced through. Sarah mouthed sorry and hurried away. Across the room, Rachel posed beneath a spotlight, walnut-framed commendation in hand, Jonathan's arm around her waist. Guests applauded. Dad beamed like a porch light left on too long. Dinner was announced. We filed into a hall dressed in white linens and floating candles, each table labeled after family vacations: Paris, Maui, Venice. I was assigned to home, a corner spot near the restrooms. Rachel commanded Paris at center stage. Clatter, polite laughs, crystal pings. Mom rose, tapped her glass. "We're blessed with 2 wonderful daughters. Rachel just won a landmark case, saved hundreds of jobs." Thunderous applause. Rachel dipped her head, smiling like royalty. "And Emma is—" Mom hesitated, searching the ceiling. "Doing valuable community work." Nods, then immediate chatter. Dad leaned closer. "Still playing with that little charity?" "We secured a FEMA grant, $200,000. He whistled. "Pocket change next to Rachel's salary, but hey, good on you." He patted my arm, oblivious. Laughter exploded from Paris, Rachel recounting courtroom theatrics. Around me, talk drifted to airfare and stock splits. No one asked about river gauges or emergency shelters. I folded and refolded my napkin until the linen bore a map of crease lines. Chicken tasted faintly of cardboard. Overhead, fairy lights trembled with each bass note. "Hold steady," I told myself. "Storm's brewing." I tried to eat, but each bite lodged halfway down, heavy as wet sand. The hall felt airless. I slipped off my blazer, craving the bite of mountain air. Uncle Pete bragged about his new riverfront cabin, waving asparagus onto my plate. I almost warned him about flood zones, then swallowed the words. Aunt Diane leaned in, perfume thick with gardenia. "Ever think of environmental consulting? Companies pay real money." "I like my job," I said. She patted my hand. "Passion's nice until life happens." Life is happening, I thought, watching lightning jitter across the skylight. Dessert coffee arrived, bitter and thin. I stirred it, spoon ticking like a clock. My mind tallied supplies back at the office: cots, radios, trauma kits. Enough for 100 guests? Maybe not. While Dad cued the slideshow, I mapped exits: south double doors, kitchen corridor, lobby, Grandma's cane, Matt's walking boot. Both would need assistance if water surged. Photos flickered: Mom cradling newborn Rachel, Rachel in cap and gown, Rachel shaking hands with the governor, none of my milestones. Each missing slide pressed on my ribs, but the storm outside pressed harder. My phone buzzed. Flash flood watch. Buncombe County. Rain slapped high windows, thunder rumbled. I pictured the river swallowing its banks, storefronts darkening one by one. I excused myself to the hallway, fluorescent bulbs humming, and dialed Jake. "Radar looks ugly," he said before I spoke. "Activate the phone tree. Low-lying neighborhoods first. I'll text the shelter list." "You got it. Need backup?" "Just keep the lines open." Sterile linoleum smell filled my lungs. Purpose settled like armor. As I pocketed the phone, Rachel appeared, eyeliner perfect. "Mom thinks you're upset," she offered. "I'm accustomed to being background noise." She frowned. "Your grant's impressive, Emma." "Thanks." Silence stretched. Distant silverware clinked. She returned to the ballroom. I followed a minute later. Lightning flashed white through the skylight. Gasps rippled. The power dipped, revived. Servers carried cheesecake. I noticed their soles squeaking, water already creeping under the loading dock door. I rose, pretending to refill my glass, and texted volunteers. "Stage gear, sandbag east lot. Watch the French Broad Bridge." Dad's toast floated above the clamor. Jokes about Rachel's billable hours. Guests laughed, oblivious to the storm pounding outside. A child shrieked near Maui, pointing at a puddle sliding across the parquet. Heads turned. Emergency lights flickered, then steadied. Dad boomed, "Must be the storm, folks. Stay calm." Calm wouldn't keep us dry. I inhaled the metallic taste of ozone and resolve. They still didn't see me, girl with the little charity, perpetual understudy. But the water would force their gaze, and when it did, they'd need the very skills they'd dismissed. I set my glass down, shoulders squaring. Thunder rolled again, deeper, as though the mountains themselves were clearing a throat. Guests whispered. Someone tried the light switch and failed. I tasted the moment. A wire stretched to snapping. One more surge and the flood would invade the room the way doubt had always invaded me. I inhaled, centered my voice, and stepped toward the microphone, ready to let them hear what preparedness sounds like. The microphone tasted like dust and fear when I brushed my lips across it to test the sound. A low hum answered, vibrating against my teeth. Water still glimmered in thin ribbons along the parquet floor, but Dad clinked his fork against a glass and beamed as if we were on a cruise ship, not a slowly leaking ark. "Folks," he boomed, gesturing for quiet, "before this weather ruins the slideshow, let's toast our star." He pivoted toward Rachel, spotlight catching the shimmer on her sequined dress. "My eldest just won a case so big the Charlotte Observer called it career-defining." Applause crackled like static. Rachel lifted her flute, eyes bright with practiced humility. "Thank you. The settlement protects over 400 workers from wrongful termination." She paused, allowing the magnitude to settle. Flashbulbs popped from every direction, the room briefly strobing white. I wiped rainwater off my phone screen, its flood alert banner still pulsing red. My fingers smelled of metal from the mic stand. They also trembled. When the clapping lulled, I cleared my throat. "And speaking of protection," I began, steady but soft, "my nonprofit just secured a $200,000 FEMA grant to expand disaster preparedness in Buncombe County." Dad laughed, too loud. "Pocket change next to Rachel's salary, kiddo, but keep at it." Laughter sprouted around the tables, a nervous, polite echo, but it stung like sleet against raw skin. My cheeks warmed. I tasted copper where I'd bitten my tongue. I forced a smile and retreated, shoes squeaking through the growing puddle. Coffee-colored water lapped the hem of my slacks, a secret warning no one else seemed to notice or care about. Jazz resumed overhead, upbeat and indifferent. At the edge of the hall, near a dim exit sign that flickered like a dying firefly, I pressed my back to the wall and watched my sister collect congratulations. Her shoulders were square, posture effortless. Dad's hand rested proudly on the small of her back, as if presenting a trophy he'd polished himself. I slipped my grant packet from my blazer pocket, 6 pages, still crisp, and folded it once, twice, until it fit like a bandage inside my fist. "It's not about the money," I reminded myself. "It's about readiness. It's about lives." Yet the paper felt suddenly thin. Thunder rattled the skylight. Tremors traveled through the chandelier crystals, making prisms dance across white tablecloths. No one looked up. They were leaning closer to Rachel, drinking in her story of cross-examinations and last-minute affidavits, as though she'd steered a ship through icebergs alone. I watched Mom glide between tables with a coffee pot, glowing with secondhand pride. Her pearls flashed when she bent toward a distant cousin. "Rachel's always been driven," she whispered, loud enough for me to hear across the buzz. "Emma could have followed that path, if she'd chosen a real career." The words slid under my collar like cold water. My lungs tightened. I forced a breath. The air smelled of wilted hydrangeas, damp wool, and something electrical, a pre-storm tang that raised the hairs on my arms. I escaped into the hallway, fluorescent lights humming overhead. My footsteps echoed off cinder block walls painted hospital beige. In the restroom mirror, I caught my reflection. Rain-frizzed hair, mascara smudged at the corners, a face I barely recognized under fluorescent glare. I splashed water on my cheeks and confronted the drip of a leaky ceiling tile landing rhythmically in the sink beside me. Plink, plink, plink. Even the building was springing leaks. Inside my chest, memories burst like unwelcome pop-ups. Dad missing my college graduation because Rachel's firm held a partner's luncheon? Mom telling church friends I was still figuring life out, while I coordinated shelters during Hurricane Florence. I pressed my palms to cool porcelain, focusing on each tile line to keep from shaking apart. "You chose this road," whispered an inner voice, half critic, half coach. "Now walk it." I straightened, smoothed my blazer, and stepped back into the hallway, where music thudded faintly through the doors. As I approached, a round of laughter erupted, Rachel mimicking an opposing counsel's stutter to great delight. Dad nearly wheezed with mirth, wiping his eyes. Lightning flashed again, longer, brighter, and for the first time, the overhead fixtures flickered off, then on. Guests murmured. I checked my watch. Only 20 minutes since the first puddle. The river was rising faster than my patience. I caught Mom by the drink station, her smile still glossy. "The creek behind the lot is at bank full," I told her quietly. "We might need to move cars." She patted my arm as one might soothe a fretful child. "Sweetheart, this building's seen worse. Go mingle. Enjoy yourself." Through the arched doorway, I saw Rachel set her empty glass on a tray without breaking conversation, fingers elegantly slicing the air to underscore some legal triumph. Applause followed her gesture like obedient birds. My throat constricted. I needed air. On the patio, wind whipped damp curls across my eyes. The parking lot sparkled with standing water reflecting street lamps. Raindrops drummed the canvas awning. Gutters gargled like clogged throats. Behind me, the door opened. Rachel stepped out, arms folded against the chill. She studied me, eyes softer than before. "Mom says you're upset," she began. "I'm preparing," I corrected, scanning dark clouds stacking over the ridgeline. She followed my gaze but seemed to see only the party lights dancing on wet asphalt. "You know Dad doesn't mean harm. Intent doesn't mop floors." I flicked water from the railing. "One good surge and those doors won't hold." She exhaled, longer than a sigh but shorter than an apology. "Your grant. 200,000's impressive," she admitted. "It's not about numbers." "I know," she hugged herself. "Sometimes you make it hard for them to understand. Sometimes they don't try." The words left harsher than intended, slicing through mist between us. Her shoulders pulled tighter. Inside, the band shifted to a saxophone solo, swelling like something mournful. The notes seeped through the glass, wrapping us in a melancholy ribbon. We stood there, two daughters separated by more than career choices, by years of unspoken measurements, silent competitions where only one was ever weighed. Finally, Rachel cleared her throat. "Come back in. I'll make sure they listen." I searched her face for sarcasm, found only fatigue. Maybe the storm pressed on her too. I nodded, and we returned to the ballroom together. Dad was preparing another toast, cheeks flushed. The floor's puddle had doubled, glistening under chandeliers now dimmed to half strength to conserve power. Still, he raised his glass. "Family," he proclaimed, "is life's greatest investment." I caught the irony like a fishhook in the gut. "Investment," he said. Yet my work, my life's investment, held no stock here. I didn't wait for an invitation this time. I stepped beside him, hand gently lowering his mic. He blinked, puzzled. Murmurs rippled. "Sorry to interrupt," I began, voice clear, carrying over the saxophone's last note. "But while we celebrate, the French Broad River has surged 2 feet. The flash flood warning just escalated. Water's entering the west wing." Gasps spread like sparks across dry grass. Chairs scraped. Dad's smile faltered. "We need to relocate vehicles," I continued, "and move any guests with mobility issues to the stage, highest point in this hall, until emergency services arrive. My team is en route with cots and medical supplies." Silence, thick as storm clouds. Then Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Grandma's cane quivered against table leg. Rachel stepped forward, this time beside me. "What do you need us to do?" she asked, loud enough for everyone. I felt the room pivot, eyes shifting, weight recalibrating. My pulse hammered, but not from fear, from something fierce and steady, rising like the river but warm, alive. "First," I said, meeting Dad's wide gaze, "someone announce over the PA to keep calm." I handed him the mic. His fingers trembling accepted. The chandeliers flickered again, and thunder boomed so close the glass doors rattled. Outside, rain fell in sheets, erasing the parking lot lines. For the first time all night, every face turned to me not with indulgence, but expectation. Respect teetered on the brink, waiting to find footing. I drew a breath, tasting metal and rain and possibility. The storm had finally given me the floor. The silence after my warning felt like a held breath. For one long moment the chandeliers glimmered, rain drummed the skylight, and every pair of eyes stayed locked on me, as if my voice alone could keep the river from rising. Then the generator hiccuped back to full power, the jazz trio struck the next chord, and conversation resumed in awkward bursts, the way startled birds settle on a wire. It was as if my announcement had floated up with the steam of the buffet and vanished. Dad straightened his tie, offered a wobbly chuckle. "Well, you heard Emma. Just a brief precaution. Let's enjoy the evening, folks." He raised his glass again, pretending the tremor in his fingers was excitement and not fear. The crowd gratefully accepted the invitation to forget. I didn't have that luxury. At the edge of the dance floor, I opened my weather radar app. Bands of orange and crimson curved across the screen like claws closing over Asheville. The French Broad was already cresting at historic levels. A news banner crawled across the bottom. Flash flood warning, immediate evacuation for low-lying areas. The timestamp was 2 minutes old. A sax riff slid silky under the chatter, but to me it sounded like a siren. I slipped behind the dessert table, pulled out my phone, and texted Jake. "Stage 1 protocol. Activate volunteer net. Deploy sandbags to community center perimeter." ETA? 3 dots appeared, then 10 minutes. Have cots, medkits, radios. Relief flickered through me. Brief, bright, gone. I pocketed the phone just as Mom glided over, carrying a platter of mini cheesecakes. "Sweetheart, guests are nervous now. Maybe dial back the catastrophe talk?" Her smile was porcelain thin. "Mom, it's not talk. The creek's already flooded the loading dock." She followed my gaze toward the double doors, where water glimmered in the seam, as delicate as mercury. "The city will handle it," she whispered. "Your father planned this party for months. Don't spoil it." A bubble of disbelief lodged in my chest. I swallowed it, tasted lemon and disappointment. "I'm not spoiling anything. The weather is." She opened her mouth, closed it. The overhead bulbs flickered again. The band stumbled, then caught the rhythm. From the stage, Rachel tapped a butter knife against a glass. "Everyone, quick announcement," her lawyer's voice carried. "We're monitoring the storm. For now, please stay calm and enjoy yourselves. If you parked near the east lot, you might move your vehicle to higher ground during the next break." She glanced at me, an unspoken, "I'm trying," then smiled at the crowd. Polite applause. Dad patted her shoulder, the proud gesture he'd never offered me. I stepped to the bar for water. The bartender filled a tumbler, hand steady, but his eyes kept darting toward the doors. Outside, wind flung sheets of rain at the glass. Branches thrummed against siding like frantic knuckles. I heard a low creak overhead, the old roof protesting. Inner voice, "They're not ready. Make them ready." I grabbed a catering cart, pushed through the hallway to the utility closet, and found emergency candles, duct tape, a stack of clean towels. As I loaded the cart, my fingers worked fast, almost automatic. Roll tape, wedge towels at door bases, create a seal. Micro-actions steadied my pulse. Back in the ballroom, puddles licked the parquet edges. Guests sidestepped damp spots with forced laughter. Uncle Pete brandished a selfie stick, filming the adventure. I clenched my jaw so hard my teeth buzzed. No time to fight ignorance, only water. Grandma B reached for a canapé but wobbled. I caught her elbow. Her thin skin felt cool as wax. "Storms never used to scare me," she murmured, eyes clouded, "but everything feels heavier now." I squeezed her hand. "We'll keep you safe." I guided her to the stage, highest ground, arranged 2 chairs, draped a quilted tablecloth over her shoulders like a shawl. She smiled, brave in the candlelight. A shout near the lobby. The local newsfeed had switched to live coverage. On a portable screen, a reporter in a neon poncho stood ankle-deep in swirling water, courthouse steps drowning behind her. "Authorities urge residents to seek upper floors immediately. Emergency shelters are opening across Buncombe County. One right here at the community center if conditions worsen." Heads snapped toward me. Recognition dawned, the pieces clicking. My nonprofit, the warning, the sandbags, the stage. Fear crept across faces like dawn's first shadow. Dad strode over. Rain speckled his suit cuffs where he'd been outside moving cars, but stubborn pride shone through. "We can't panic the guests," he muttered. I met his gaze. "Panic isn't the enemy, Dad. Unpreparedness is." His jaw worked, searching for rebuttal. None came. Lights died. The room inhaled collectively, dark, silent aside from the percussion of rain and one child's whimper. Emergency lamps blinked on, painting everything in dim amber. Shadows leapt tall across walls. Candle flames jittered on tables I'd prepped. In that hush, I heard it. The low groan of water pushing against exterior doors. A physical force. Patient. Relentless. I rolled the catering cart to center floor. "Flashlights here," I called. "Form a line. Parents with kids first, then seniors." People obeyed, hesitant but grateful. Micro actions again. Pass batteries, light candles, direct traffic. My lungs found a steady rhythm, heartbeats syncing with purpose. Rachel hustled up, cheeks flushed. "Your volunteer team's outside, knee-deep already," she said, voice tight but steady. "They're stacking sandbags." "Good. I need you to help with triage. Anyone on medication, make a list. Allergies, mobility issues." She nodded, scribbling on her phone. Mom appeared, mascara streaked from humidity. She clutched the FEMA grant packet I'd folded earlier, now smoothed open. "You planned for this," she whispered, eyes shining with something I hadn't seen since childhood. Wonder. Lightning spat white through the skylight, revealing raindrops racing down the glass like fireworks in reverse. The boom followed, rattling silverware. A few guests shrieked. Someone dropped a wine glass. Shards scattered among reflections of each quivering candle. I crouched, swept glass into a linen napkin, tied it tight, and handed it to a busboy. "Trash chute, top bin," I instructed. He sprinted off. Outside the lobby doors, Jake's silhouette appeared, soaked and grinning grimly. I pushed through. Rain stung like pellets, the sky a single rolling bruise. He handed me a radio wrapped in plastic. "Creeks breached the lot. We've got 30 volunteers. Need inside coordinator." "I'm on it." I keyed the mic. "Base, status?" A crackle, then, "North entrance secure. Sandbags holding 6 inches. We're moving vehicles to the hill." Jake jerked his chin toward the ballroom. "How's it in there?" "Dry, barely. If pressure builds, those doors blow. We'll reinforce." He tugged gloves higher, turned to shout orders. Headlamps bobbed through the deluge, ghostly constellations of resolve. I re-entered the lobby, shoes squelching. The ballroom hummed with organized movement. Chairs stacked on tables, elders guided to the stage, kids clutching board games handed out from the prize table. Rachel stood near the PA system, reading names of medication-dependent guests so we could secure their pills. Her voice was firm, precise, directing, not performing. Dad approached again, face pale. He laid a hand on my shoulder. "I was wrong," he said quietly, "about all of this." I felt the weight of his remorse, heavy as the rain pounding the roof, but there was no time to unpack forgiveness. Instead, I glanced at his trembling hand and offered a task. "Channel your accounting skills, inventory kitchen stocks, calculate rations for 60 people, 12 hours minimum." Relief flickered in his eyes at the clarity of purpose. He nodded, hustled away. Mom joined me, breath shallow. "What can I do?" "Comfort duty," I said. "Warm blankets, check on Grandma, keep spirits up." She pressed her hand over her heart, exhaled, and went to work. I climbed the stage steps, surveyed the room. Candlelight made the crowd glow like figures in an old oil painting, faces flushed, anxious, but listening. The stereo's battery pack still worked. Soft acoustic guitar drifted, soothing as rain on a porch roof. Radio crackled. North wall water rising, 2 inches per minute. I keyed back. Hold position. Rotate cruise every 15. Safety first. As I lowered the radio, my gaze met Rachel's across the hall. She raised a thumb. I answered with a tight nod, something like gratitude warming the chill between us. A sudden silence fell, the unmistakable lull before a downpour turns feral. Every candle flame elongated, leaning east. We all looked toward the lobby doors. Then came the roar, deeper than thunder, a solid, rushing sound of river water claiming new territory. I gripped the mic stand, voice steady but urgent. Positions! Remember your training. The next hour decides everything. The first door hinge squealed under pressure. Metal groaned like a beast waking. Candlelight flickered on 1,000 widened eyes. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was at our doorstep, demanding proof of every choice I'd made, and I was ready to answer. The lobby doors didn't burst open. They surrendered. A deafening crack echoed through the ballroom as one hinge tore loose. The door buckled inward, followed by a surge of muddy water that slammed into the parquet floor like a fist. Screams fractured the air, sharp and panicked. Candlelight scattered in 1,000 directions as tables shifted, chairs toppled, and feet scrambled. "Move!" I shouted over the roar. The water came fast, faster than anyone expected. A knee-high wave rushed across the room, swallowing table legs, dragging decorations and plates with it. The momentum knocked a chair into a toddler's knees. The boy wailed as his father scooped him up. I jumped from the stage, wading into the flood. "Head to the platform!" I pointed to the raised stage area, now our only safe zone. "Help the elderly. Don't run. Stay low. Hold hands." Jake's voice crackled over the radio in my vest pocket. "East side breached. We're sandbagging the hallway entrance now. You've got 5 feet of clearance, then the second wave hits." "Copy. We're evacuating to high ground inside." The water was cold, fast, and thick with debris. Napkins, shoes, even an overturned punch bowl spun near my knees. I grabbed it and handed it to an older woman for balance. Rachel appeared beside me, her sequined heels long gone, barefoot and bracing a senior on each arm. "This way, Mrs. Garcia, just a few more steps. You're okay." Across the room, Mom clutched a towel against Grandma B's chest as Dad lifted her into a padded chair, both of them drenched, but steady. His eyes found mine, panicked but focused, and I gave him a single nod. He nodded back, and I realized he was listening now. Following my lead, I reached for the mic. The PA still worked, buzzing slightly under pressure. My voice echoed across the room, low but unwavering. "This is not a panic moment, it's a precision moment. Stay calm, follow instructions, we've trained for this." That word, "we," surprised me even as I said it. But it was true. My team had trained, I had trained, and now so had my family, thrown headfirst into a lesson they never signed up for. I turned to Jake's volunteers, soaked and mud-splattered, moving like clockwork. Blankets arrived. Flashlights swept the shadows. Emergency kits were unpacked and sorted on the kitchen counter. Someone started boiling water from bottled supplies using a camping stove. I felt pride bloom in my chest like a flare. Still, water kept rising. I sloshed toward the utility room and yanked the emergency breaker. Sparks spat before going dead. The building fell into a dim orange twilight lit only by candles and portable LEDs. Rain pounded the roof like a drum line gone mad. "Emma!" Jake's voice again. "Water's creeping toward the generator." "We have 10 minutes, Max," I muttered. I looked around. People were huddled, scared, soaked, but alive, and looking to me. I climbed back on stage, scanning the room. The flood had turned the ballroom into a brackish pool, maybe 6 inches deep now, but climbing. I caught Rachel handing out cough drops from her purse to kids shivering on the stage. Her silk blouse clung to her back, streaked with dirt. She looked more human, more like a sister than she had in years. Dad waved from the kitchen. "We've got shelf-stable food, enough for everyone overnight. I'm sorting by dietary needs." Mom joined a group of volunteers who were placing chairs sideways along the doors, using them to slow debris flow. Her pearl necklace was gone, her makeup smudged, but her hands moved fast, tucking towels, taping corners, comforting strangers. For the first time in my adult life, we were on the same side of something, not just biologically, but practically, emotionally, side by side in the flood. The chandelier above us swung slightly. The groan of the building structure made me freeze. We had hours to go, possibly more. The youngest child, a girl in yellow pajamas and soaked bunny slippers, started to cry. Her mother hugged her, murmuring gently, but it wasn't working. I knelt beside her. "Hey," I said, soft. "You like stories?" She sniffled and nodded. "Well," I said, wiping her cheek, "this is the part of the story where the heroes come in." She looked at me, still trembling. "And guess what? You're one of them." Her tiny fingers gripped mine. "Really?" "Really. Heroes get scared too, but they stay, they help, and they hold on. That's you." She didn't say anything, but she stopped crying, and that's when I knew. We weren't just surviving, we were holding each other up in the dark. Jake came in through the side hallway, sloshing wet. "City's deploying sand trucks near the main road. They're saying we're looking at a 100-year flood event." I exhaled. "We're not going anywhere tonight." His hand brushed my shoulder. "But we're not losing anyone either. That's because of you, Emma." My throat caught. I looked away, but he saw it anyway. "We'll rotate watch," he continued. "You need rest too." I shook my head. "Not yet." He gave me a look that said soon, then moved on. The water had slowed, temporarily contained by the outer wall barricades, but the tension remained. People curled into blankets, paper cups steaming with instant soup. Grandparents napped while teens took flashlight patrols. Even the saxophonist from the jazz trio played soft lullabies near the entrance, turning fear into melody. I checked my phone, 1:46 a.m., battery at 22%. Outside, the rain finally began to soften, turning from percussion into whisper. But inside, we were still wet, exhausted, and waiting. I settled beside Grandma B, who was half asleep, breathing shallow but steady. She opened one eye and said, "You're the only Carter woman I've ever seen command a room like this." I smiled. "That's kind of a low bar." She chuckled. "No, it's not." I looked around. My sister helping a diabetic find her insulin. My father counting canned beans like they were gold. My mother leading a game of charades to keep spirits high. This wasn't the same family I'd arrived to yesterday. Or maybe it was, and I was only now letting them show up. My body ached. My feet throbbed. But inside me, something had shifted. Not just how they saw me, but how I saw myself. The girl who used to shrink in family photos was now standing on the stage, soaked to the bone, guiding them through a storm that was far from over. Because while the rain had slowed, the danger hadn't passed, and tomorrow, when the sun rose over a battered Asheville, the world would see what we had done here tonight. But before the dawn came the reckoning. Dawn hadn't broken, yet the ballroom was restless in a flicker of candles and generator glow. I bent over a folding table, warped but steady, where a topo map, 3 radios, and a swollen notebook formed our nerve center. I tapped my headlamp on and traced the French Broad's swollen curve. 50 washed-out faces watched. My pulse hammered, but at last it felt like fuel. "Positions, check in?" Jake's baritone answered through static. "West barricade holding, 12 inches inside, crew rotating." A teen voice followed. "East lot clear, buses on higher ground." The machine was turning. I marked updates, each pencil stroke a small promise. The air was soup of wet wool, canned broth, and diesel. Rain eased to a patter, but runoff kept pressing on the walls, making metal groan. I faced the crowd. "Alpha, blankets, Bravo, food, Charlie, door watch. If you've slept under half an hour, switch." Rachel raised a hand from the blanket pile. "Copy, Alpha rotating." Her lawyer polish was gone. She sounded like solid oak. Dad portioned rice with an accountant's precision. Mom checked pulses, her pearl necklace long abandoned. Even Grandma, oxygen line hissing, knotted strips of tablecloth into rope. For once, we were rowing the same direction. Jake splashed in, coat dripping. He handed me a thumb drive. "Updated flood zones." I slotted it into our old laptop. A red stain spread across Riverside Drive. "Mobile parks under." He nodded. "Fire department's begging for boats." The rowing club boathouse flashed through my mind. "Delta team meet me north exit in 10. Dry suits, life vests. A hush, then scattered cheers. Dad pressed a flashlight into my palm. "Batteries are fresh," he murmured. I squeezed back, words unnecessary. Outside, dawn seeped pale and cold. Delta team, 3 students, an off-duty medic, and Rachel in borrowed waders, waited under the awning. Breath fogged the air. We waded up the service road, water tugging at our thighs. At the boathouse, neon shells bobbed against half-submerged racks. We freed 3, muscles burning, and pushed off. "Teams of 2, I ordered. "Stay near treetops, avoid the main current, rendezvous at the center." Rachel paired with the medic. Our eyes met, a fragile treaty. "I can row," she said. "I know." Leah, a barista from last fall's workshop, climbed beside me. Never thought disaster drills would come true this fast. No better baptism. We paddled into streets turned rivers. Ducks flapped overhead, confused silhouettes against gray. A rooftop appeared, an elderly man waving a red towel. Leah steadied us while I extended the ladder. Cold bit my wrists, but adrenaline numbed the pain. "You're safe now," I told him, wrapping foil around shaking shoulders. We gathered 2 more survivors, a pregnant woman clutching her cat and a teen marooned on a porch swing. Each rescue stitched years of doubt into something strong. Returning, the community center rose like an island, tables lashed into docks. Dad waved a coat rack flag, guiding us in. Mom pressed cups of broth into numb hands. Inside, the ballroom buzzed like a hive. Triage at one corner, supply chain at another. The sax player turned quiet scales that soothed nerves better than words. I climbed the stage, dripping. "We've evacuated 23 people. Water should crest by noon, but we stay alert. Next ops, Mill District rescues, medicine drop at Riverside Shelter. Rotations every 2 hours." Applause rose, ragged, sincere. I saw myself reflected in their eyes, not as the spare daughter, but as the one steering the ship. A city alert pinged. Levee north of downtown compromised. My stomach dipped, then settled. I lifted the radio. "All units, prep for redeployment. New breach on the north line." Gasps rippled. Fear returned. I raised a hand. "We adapt. We've proved that already." Rachel grabbed blank forms, turning them into incident logs. Jake assigned crews. Volunteers tightened gloves. The machine revved higher. I took 30 seconds to breathe, feeling the ache in my shoulders, damp fabric on my skin, the shudder of the building as water slid past its foundations. Then the radio squawked again. "Command, East Barricade requests fresh sandbags." "Copy," I answered. "Bravo 2, deliver from kitchen stock. Use the flour sacks if you run out of burlap." A chuckle on the line. "We'll bake the river a cake, ma'am." Humor meant morale. Morale meant endurance. Across the floor, children clustered around Mom, who had turned a damp tablecloth into a puppet stage. Tiny squeals replaced terrified sobbing. Even crisis has room for make-believe. Grandma waved me closer, her rope of knotted cloth coiled in her lap. "For tying boats," she whispered. I kissed her papery forehead. She smelled of lavender and rain. At the pantry doorway, Dad halted a volunteer. "High-protein bars only for diabetics," he instructed, voice firm, compassionate. Watching him shoulder responsibility felt like seeing a mountain shift. I walked the perimeter, checking seals. Water lapped mid-shin but no longer climbed. My inner monologue, once a litany of doubts, counted victories instead. 1 hinge braced, 2 children warmed, 3 radios dry. Thunder rumbled far off, reminding us the storm could still pivot. Yet hope scented the air, mingling with wet drywall and instant coffee. Jake reappeared holding a soaked newspaper. The headline blared, "Non-profit funding cuts proposed." I ripped a soggy strip and let the river claim it. "Timing's everything," I said. He laughed, then sobered. "Governor wants a live interview at noon. They're hearing this is the safest shelter in the county." If visibility meant resources, I'd face the camera. "Tell them yes, after the Mill District evac." Candles fluttered against ochre walls, radios hummed, and I tasted salt, sweat or tears, I wasn't sure. "Captain," Leah called, pointing at a side window. Pale gold edged the clouds. Sunrise, timid but undeniable. Relief rippled. Yet daylight revealed cars bobbing, trees uprooted, power lines drooping like tired jump ropes. The fight had changed, not ended. I squared my shoulders. New day, same mission, I told everyone. Eat, hydrate, gear up. The river has more questions and we have answers. Cheers. Hoarse, exhausted, unstoppable filled the room. Value isn't measured in applause or pay stubs. It's counted in fear eased and mornings reclaimed. Then the wind shifted, colder, carrying a distant rumble that didn't sound like thunder. The radio confirmed it. A secondary dam upstream had begun to seep. The map suddenly felt too small, and the day we'd just won threatened to become the night we'd fight all over again. The sound that rolled down from the north wasn't thunder. It was deeper, more guttural. A groan that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The dam's seepage wasn't just a threat. It was a promise, and it was moving fast. The ballroom lights, still flickering from generator strain, dimmed as if the building held its breath with us. I stood at the center, map still spread across the folding table. Coffee rings and muddy fingerprints marking where dozens of hands had worked through the night. The smell of wet carpet, sweat, and burnt propane clung to the air. Jake's voice came through the radio, crisp despite the static. County engineers say if the pressure doesn't ease upstream, we've got a surge window of 4 hours. They want us on full alert. I pinched the bridge of my nose. 4 hours. We could work with that, barely. I turned to the room, lit by a patchwork of flashlights and candles. Faces looked up at me, not just for instruction now, but with faith. My pulse steadied. My voice followed. All right, listen up. We've got 4 hours before the next possible surge, but we're not going to wait and hope. We're going to prepare like we always do, like we trained for, like we've been doing all night. Nods, a few claps. One person, someone I barely knew, stood and saluted. Not mockingly, seriously. I swallowed hard. I ran my hands along the map and designated sectors. South wing, reinforce sandbags. East, start emergency inventory again. We'll rotate hydration every 90 minutes, and anyone feeling dizzy or cold tells me immediately. People moved before I finished speaking. Jake returned moments later, soaked and panting. Reporters are setting up 2 blocks away. Channel 9 and 12 both want to live stream the shelter. My stomach dipped. The media. I'm not interested in grandstanding, I muttered. Jake's eyes met mine. It's not about ego, Emma. The town needs a face to trust. You're it. He was right. I wiped mud off my cheek and walked out the back entrance, where the rain had softened into a mist. Gray light broke through clouds, painting the hills in soft charcoal tones. In the distance, vans were parked with antennas raised, crews scrambling to cover the story that had started as a forgotten anniversary party and turned into a regional crisis command center. I didn't give a speech, just a few clipped lines into the camera, standing in front of the soaked community center with Jake and Rachel beside me. This is Asheville's Shelter Zone 3. We are operational, stocked, and secure for now. If you are in a vulnerable area, come here. We will not turn you away. This isn't about politics or headlines. It's about people. The anchor looked surprised. She blinked, then whispered, "That was perfect," as she rapped. We walked back inside. The shelter was alive with energy, not panic, not fear, but movement. Purpose. Leah updated me on the Mill District evac. We pulled 6 more out with the boats. 1 elderly man with hypothermia, but he's stable. Also, people are asking for you, Emma, like strangers. They're scared, I said, brushing water from my collar. They just want someone to look at who doesn't flinch. But I did flinch. Inside, where doubt still lived like mildew, where the Emma of yesterday crouched in the corner of her family's shadow, afraid her voice didn't matter. And yet, no one was looking for Rachel right now, or Dad, or the mayor. They were looking for me, because now they saw me. Even my volunteers, some only half-trained, others from my old workshop circuits, were showing up in droves. The group chat pinged every 30 seconds. We've got bottled water in the truck. Bringing clean socks and masks from church basement. Emma said duct tape matters. We've got rolls. I laughed out loud at that one. Tears sprang up too quickly, hot against the cold breeze. I wiped them fast. The girl who used to beg for recognition wasn't here anymore. Inside, Rachel was organizing medical data on a whiteboard we'd dragged from the lobby. She looked up. "You okay?" "I think I'm starting to be." She stepped closer. I never understood what you really did until last night. Most people don't until the water's at their ankles. She exhaled. It's not just the work, it's the way you lead. Dad used to call you directionless. I think you just had a compass we didn't understand. My eyes burned again. Thanks. She didn't offer more words, just passed me a clipboard full of updated names and allergy charts. The weight of it felt better than any bouquet or applause. By mid-morning, the building buzzed like a well-oiled machine. Local restaurants dropped off hot meals. Volunteers coordinated evacuees into sleep shifts. A group of teenagers, inspired by Grandma B's knotting project, started weaving rope ladders from tablecloths and extension cords. Someone even started collecting jokes on index cards, comic relief taped to the wall near the restrooms. One note read, "Why did the river go to therapy? Too many unresolved currents. It was terrible. And perfect." At noon, Mayor Laura Thompson arrived in a bright orange slicker, escorted by police through the floodplain. Her face paled as she stepped inside the shelter and saw the operation in full swing, far beyond what the city had expected. She removed her hood and walked straight to me. "I've had a crisis team on standby for 12 hours, she said, "but this is better than any plan they proposed. How did you—" "We prepared," I said simply, "even when no one cared that we were." Jake stood behind me, Rachel to my left. My family, my team. Mayor Thompson nodded slowly, then she turned to the press behind her. "I want Asheville to know," she said into the cameras, "that this woman, Emma Carter, and her nonprofit are the reason hundreds of lives are safe right now. She has not only led this community through the worst storm we've seen in decades, but done it with grace, precision, and extraordinary courage." Applause broke out. Not the polite kind, but fierce and grateful. A few people stood, then more and more. I felt Rachel's hand rest lightly on my back. Dad's voice cut through the clapping from somewhere near the kitchen. "That's my daughter!" And for the first time in years, I didn't wince when he said it. I smiled. But just as the cameras cut and the press started packing, my radio buzzed. "Emma, urgent. Riverside reports new breach. Minor now, but pressure's increasing." I turned to Jake. "We're not done." He nodded, already reaching for the map. The crowd resumed its flow. Kids napped, volunteers rotated, and just as the sun broke through the clouds, I looked out the north window, where a dark ribbon twisted through the distant trees. The water wasn't finished with us yet, and neither was I. The mayor's praise still echoed in the room, but I barely registered it, because in my ear, the radio kept hissing one word over and over: breach. I turned from the cameras, the applause, and the rows of blinking lights back toward the whiteboard, where the map of Asheville still lay open, wrinkled, soaked, and now dangerously outdated. "Riverside's the low point," I muttered to Jake as he met me at the supply table. "If we lose it completely, the runoff will snake right into the west corridor. We've got evacuees sleeping there." "We've got about an hour if that breach worsens," he said. "Max." I looked around the room, still buzzing from the mayor's visit. People were laughing softly now, the tension momentarily eased. Volunteers stirred soup. Kids colored with donated crayons. Rachel had started a list of medical supply needs on a salvaged chalkboard. And yet, beyond the walls, the river had made a promise. And I'd learned by now, water always keeps its word. I grabbed the chalk from Rachel's hand and scrawled in big letters at the top of the board, "We stay ready." She looked up, brow furrowed. "What's happening?" I showed her the update. "Riverside's holding, barely. If it collapses, this becomes the front line." Her expression shifted. Fear, resolve, a flicker of the courtroom steel she carried like second nature. "What do you need?" "Relocation teams. We can't wait to be told. We need to move everyone in the West Wing to the auditorium, elevate supplies, reinforce doorways with anything waterproof." She nodded and peeled off, already shouting instructions. The room changed instantly. Within seconds, the smiles vanished. But so did the complacency. A quiet rhythm returned, the kind forged from long hours and adrenaline, the kind of focus that holds people together when panic wants to take the wheel. Jake passed me an extra headset. "You're coordinating all 3 zones now." I slipped it on, clicked the button, and spoke calmly. "All stations, this is command." Begin Phase 2 emergency protocol. Evacuation of West Sector. Repeat, West Sector evac immediately. A crackling voice from the other side of the building replied, "Copy that. Moving now." In less than 10 minutes, cots were folded, crates were stacked, blankets were slung over shoulders as evacuees, some shivering, some calm, followed our instructions without resistance. They trusted us now. Not because we wore badges or held titles, but because we showed up. Hour after hour, wet, tired, and still showing up. By the time the first gust of muddy wind howled through the side hall, the west wing stood empty. I stood at the edge of the hallway, ankle-deep in runoff, watching the makeshift barricade ripple like a lung ready to collapse. I counted the seconds between each groan of the building's beams, memorizing their rhythm. Mom joined me, holding towels she hadn't stopped folding since 3 a.m. Her hair was frizzed out of its bun, and she wore Dad's old sweater, 2 sizes too big. She looked small and deeply present. "You saw this coming before any of us," she said softly, eyes fixed on the doorway. "I hoped I was wrong," I whispered. She looked over at me. "I never gave your work the weight it deserved. I thought, if it didn't come with a title or a pension plan, it wasn't real." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. "I was wrong, Emma," she said, the way someone confesses to a mirror, "and I think I've been wrong for a long time." Behind us, Dad emerged from the kitchen with a stack of dry crackers and a clipboard. "Inventory's done. We've got enough for 36 hours if we ration carefully." His voice cracked. "I've been keeping the wrong records my whole life." I turned to them, drenched, exhausted, but somehow weightless. "There's still time to make this one right." We didn't hug. We just stood shoulder to shoulder as another gust rattled the exit doors. The mayor returned 2 hours later with a camera crew and her boots covered in ash-gray muck. This time, her security didn't stop at the threshold. She walked straight up to me while the cameras rolled. "Emma Carter," she said into the mic, "this town owes you more than we can ever repay." I blinked. "This team," I said, motioning around me, "deserves that credit. Every volunteer, evacuee, and kid who shared their crayons." She smiled. "You built this team, and you kept us safe. People across the state are watching." One of the city reporters stepped forward. "Governor issued a statement just now, wants to speak to you directly. You're being called the heart of Asheville's response." Jake chuckled under his breath. "Told you." I didn't answer. I just stared at the camera's red light, and for a moment I let myself feel it. Not fame, not recognition, but worth. Not because someone powerful said I mattered, but because people survived, and survival is proof. As the camera crew panned to show the inside of our shelter, now a well-oiled machine with labeled zones, warm food, art stations for kids, and makeshift charging banks from car batteries, I felt the narrative shift. I wasn't the daughter they tolerated. I was the reason they had a second day. And people online knew it too. One of the reporters showed me a tweet, my face half lit by candlelight with the caption, "It had already been shared over 50,000 times." My heart should have raced, but all I felt was a quiet, full ache. Not from ego, from knowing I hadn't backed down when it would have been easy, that every sandbag, every phone call, every ignored grant rejection had led here. Rachel stood beside me again, arms crossed over a utility jacket she'd found in Lost and Found. "So, you're going viral. Let's hope the flood doesn't." She laughed, really laughed, and bumped her shoulder into mine. As the day stretched on, supply trucks rolled in. FEMA was deploying formal aid, but we weren't done. People still needed beds, walls still leaked, trauma still sat in some guests' eyes like rain that hadn't fallen yet. I took another inventory round, gave a child my dry socks, replaced a generator fuse with numb fingers. And all the while that damn breach loomed. At 6:03 p.m., the radio crackled with a new update. The tone of the voice was clipped, tense. "This is County Water. We've got rapid erosion on the north embankment. If it gives, surge projection is 3 feet in 30 minutes. My breath caught. 3 feet, 30 minutes. The building could hold if the east wall stayed braced, but it might not. I turned back to Jake, Rachel, and every soul now watching me again, this time not for applause, but for the next move. I stepped toward the stage and picked up the megaphone. Its plastic body felt warm in my hands from the last time I'd used it. I raised it, locked eyes with the people I now called mine, and spoke with a voice that no longer trembled. "We need to move, fast. Phase 3 shelter protocol begins now." And just like that, the applause faded into footsteps, because the town still needed us, and the river wasn't finished yet. The megaphone left a faint imprint against my palm as I lowered it. Even as the echo of my voice faded into the charged air, movement swept the room. Chairs scraped across tile. Children were gathered up. Flashlights clicked on. Cots folded with crisp efficiency. No one asked, "Are you sure?" Not anymore. Rachel handed out updated duty sheets. Dad packed the last of the dry rations into labeled bins. Mom wrapped Grandma B in her raincoat, securing it like a makeshift cocoon. For the first time, I didn't need to tell them what to do. They were already doing it. My family had stopped spectating. I knelt beside an elderly man whose eyes were clouded with confusion. "You're going to be okay," I said softly, tying his shoes as his frail hands trembled. "We've got you." Outside, the wind was no longer a whisper. It was a growl. Thunder cracked like a warning shot. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Not the kind to alert, but the kind that confirms it's real. Jake stood beside the back entrance, radio pressed to his ear. "County says the embankment's slipping faster than they can reinforce. If the dam breaches entirely, we get hit with the tail surge. It'll be violent, but short-lived." "How long until impact?" He glanced at the horizon. "Maybe 15 minutes. 15. The word rang in my ears like a countdown. My knees ached from kneeling, but I stood up tall. "Then let's make every second matter." In the main hallway, water had already begun to pool again, just a slow trickle snaking through the cracked foundation, but enough to confirm what we already knew. We weren't safe here anymore. The auditorium, the old one from the 1960s, once condemned but recently cleaned out, was 30 yards uphill behind the building. Its walls were thick concrete, no windows, soundproof, elevated. In other words, perfect. But we had to move everyone there now. I stepped onto a table, holding the megaphone high. "We're going in teams of 10, seniors and children first. Everyone else, grab supplies, lift with your knees, and stay calm." As I climbed down, Dad stopped me. He held up a folded tarp. "Use this for cover on the ramp. If rain hits hard, it'll buy a few seconds of warmth for the little ones." I stared at him. "You remembered the old shelter protocol?" He gave a sheepish smile. "I've been reading your disaster prep manual, the one I used to call Overkill." A beat passed. Then I laughed. I couldn't help it. "That's ironic," I said, grabbing the tarp. "Coming from the guy who owns 5 flashlights for a barbecue?" His face softened. "You were right, Emma. Not just about tonight, about all of it." He didn't say more. He didn't need to. Mom arrived with 2 laminated lists, one marked medication inventory and the other known allergies. Her handwriting was sharp and slanted, just like the notes she used to leave on the fridge growing up. "I stayed up last night rewriting these," she admitted. "Didn't want to miss anything." She paused, her voice quiet but unwavering. "I was wrong to diminish your work. I didn't understand. But I see it now. I see you now." Emotion hit me like wind, not dramatic or overwhelming, just a steady pressure that told me something had finally shifted. My voice caught, but I managed. "Thank you." Rachel approached from behind, brushing rain off her sleeves. "Evacuation teams are ready," she said, eyes clear. "You want to lead the first group?" I looked at the evacuees, dozens of them, many clutching soggy blankets or holding hands tightly. Some looked dazed, others resolute. "No," I said, stepping back. "Let's let them." And so they did. Volunteers carried children on their backs. Teenagers guided the elderly arm in arm. Families moved in pairs and trios, barefoot and soaked but determined. I took the rear of the first wave, walking behind Mom, Dad, and Rachel. We didn't speak, just moved, our boots sloshing through muddy gravel. It was strange how quiet it had become, like even the storm was holding its breath, waiting to see what we'd do next. Inside the auditorium, we transformed chaos into structure. Bleachers lined with blankets, medical kits open near the front, a safe zone created for children with glow sticks taped to the walls like stars. A woman in her 20s clutched my arm. Her eyes were red, her hair drenched. "Are you Emma?" she asked. I nodded. She handed me a small card, barely legible from the rain. "My sister lives in Florida. She said she saw you online. She told me if I could get here, I'd be safe." I closed my fingers around the card. "You are," I said. "You are safe now." The words felt surreal. Me, the safe one, the reliable one. For so long, I was the girl they looked past, not the one they looked to. But that was gone now, washed away in the storm. Outside, a boom cracked so loudly the walls vibrated. Jake came running down the corridor. "Dam breach confirmed. Water moving fast but not wide. Main surge should pass just west of us." "Will it reach this building?" He looked at me, hesitated. "If it does, it'll kiss the foundation, no deeper." "Then we hold." I turned back to the crowd inside the auditorium and raised my voice. "We're in the safest spot we've got. We hold tight, we hold together." Hours passed in the thick syrup of waiting. I paced, checked doors, helped pass out soup and dry socks, told jokes I could barely remember. Everyone was tired but alert. A community on edge, yet intact. Sometime near midnight, the worst of the water passed. The hallway flooded up to the stairwell, but never higher. When the all clear came through on the radio, I didn't cheer. I just sat on the steps and let myself breathe. Across the room, Dad leaned against a pillar, watching me with a look that was different from every glance he'd given before. It wasn't doubt or concern. It wasn't worry or disappointment. It was pride. Not the kind you manufacture for social media, the quiet kind, the earned kind. He walked over and sat beside me. "You didn't just save this building," he said. "You saved this family." I looked at him. "No," I whispered. "We did that together." And somewhere in the dark, I felt a kind of peace I hadn't known since I was a girl with a cardboard science fair poster, dreaming about storm drains and disaster kits. But our work wasn't finished, because Dawn would bring reporters, yes, but also cleanup, assessment, grief, renewal. And with the floodwater receding, the truth no one wanted to say would rise to the surface. What happened in the shelter would make headlines, but what happened next would change my family forever. Morning unfolded like a bruise, purple clouds fading to tender pink while the French Broad whispered along its new, swollen banks. The floodwaters had pulled back during the night, leaving behind a slick mosaic of mud, flattened grass, and overturned trash cans that glinted under fragile sunlight. I stood on the community center steps, boots caked with silt, watching city crews fan out with shovels and sump pumps. My breath clouded in the cool air. Exhaustion sat heavy on my shoulders, but the hush after so much chaos felt almost holy. For the first time in 36 hours, no alarms blared, no children cried, just the slow, deliberate scrape of rubber against pavement and the occasional squawk of a walkie-talkie. Behind me, inside the makeshift shelter, volunteers dismantled cots, folded blankets, and stacked crates of leftover supplies. The building smelled like bleach and instant coffee, a strange combination that somehow meant survival. Dad appeared at my elbow, wiping sweat from his brow with a handkerchief that looked suspiciously like one of Mom's linen napkins. A tablet nestled in the crook of his arm, numbers scrolled across the screen. "I took a look at your books," he said, clearing his throat as though confessing a secret sin. "You run impressively lean, but FEMA reimbursements can be slow. You might face a liquidity crunch before the grant lands." He handed me the tablet. I stared at the neat columns, projected expenses, cash flow timelines, contingency estimates, lines of code in the only language Dad truly trusted. "I built a provisional budget," he continued, tapping a cell shaded pale green. "If you shift from quarterly to monthly reporting, you could secure bridge funding through a short-term revolving line, lower interest, less administrative drag." The way he said bridge felt different now, less like a financial term, more like a promise stretched between us. "Thank you," I whispered, fingers brushing the tablet's edge. My throat tightened, but I kept my gaze steady. "I'd love your help setting it up." His shoulders eased as though decades of rigid accounting posture had finally unclenched. "I'd like that too." Inside, Mom was kneeling on a tarp, scrubbing hardened mud from donated rain boots. Her palms were raw, nails chipped. She didn't flinch when muck splattered her blouse. She just kept scrubbing, humming an old gospel tune under her breath. I crouched beside her, dipping a sponge into soapy water. The suds shimmered with oil-slick rainbows. She paused, pushing damp hair behind her ear. "You always talked about preparedness drills," she said, voice low. "I used to picture fire extinguishers and canned beans." Her smile was fragile. "I didn't understand it was about people first." I squeezed water from the sponge, watched rivulets carve tiny rivers through the grime. "Most days it is just fire extinguishers and beans," I said. "But they matter when the real storm hits." Mom nodded, eyes glassy. "Teach me, Emma. I want to know what to store, how to train, where to volunteer. I want to be useful next time, not just proud after the fact." That word, proud, landed softly like the first dry leaf of autumn. My chest ached, but in a way that promised healing, not hurt. She pressed a folded piece of paper into my palm. I opened it. A handwritten schedule of the local homeschooling co-op she managed, dotted with hearts beside dates she planned to promote disaster preparedness workshops. "I thought we could collaborate," she said. "Your nonprofit, my network." My heartbeat quickened. "I'd like that." Across the room, Rachel sat at a collapsible table littered with legal pads and half-drunk coffee cups, her blazer slung over a chair back and sleeves rolled to the elbows. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her posture was relaxed, an ease I'd rarely seen outside holidays or photo ops. She called me over with a flick of her highlighter. "I dug into your 501 bylaws," she said, flipping a page. "They're serviceable, but you're missing language that protects directors from personal liability in large-scale disasters. Also, I can merge your community outreach clause with federal volunteer protection, lowering your insurance premiums." I blinked. "You did that overnight?" She shrugged. "Purpose is a better stimulant than espresso." A crooked grin pulled at her lips. "Besides, pro bono work looks good when you're up for senior partner." She sobered, tapping the binder. "Honestly, Emma, I should have done this years ago. I dismissed your nonprofit because I didn't see the courtroom, but the courtroom was here all along, just without marble columns." Emotion pricked behind my eyes. I exhaled slowly, grounding myself in the tactile, the slick paper under my fingertips, the faint tang of bleach, the hum of the generator cycling down. My voice cracked. I tried again. "Thank you." Rachel reached across the table, covering my hand with hers, steady, warm. "We'll finalize this week. Then we strategize long-term growth." Long-term growth. Words that once felt out of reach now sat comfortably between us. Jake strode in, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Infrastructure crew says the auditorium's clear for regular use. City's designating this place a permanent disaster hub, under your leadership if you want it." He raised his eyebrows, as if the answer could be anything but yes. I gave a small, incredulous laugh. "That's huge." "It's earned," he said, then more softly. "And you're not alone anymore." A lump formed in my throat. I swallowed it, nodding. We spent the afternoon elbow-deep in debris, side by side with strangers who now felt like next of kin. Dad managed supply receipts in a corner, his calculator clicking like a metronome. Mom stapled volunteer sign-up sheets to a bulletin board she'd scrubbed clean. Rachel outlined a risk management plan on butcher paper, kids scrawling cartoons in the blank margins. Jake organized tool rentals while offering quiet encouragement, his presence a steady anchor. And me? I floated between them all, part forewoman, part translator, part witness to a miracle unfolding in real time. But healing isn't a straight line, it's a muddy switchback. Late in the day, as sun dipped behind the hills in a haze of gold, Dad approached with an invoice log. Numbers blurred, fatigue pressed like sandbags against my skull. "You look spent," he said, concern tugging at his voice. "When's the last time you slept?" A faint smile. "Yesterday's morning, maybe?" His brow furrowed. "Let me finish these spreadsheets. You rest." I hesitated. Old habits die hard. Control feels safer than trust. But I forced myself to inhale, to release. "Okay," I said, handing over the pen. Our fingers brushed, brief spark, like the strike of a match before flame catches. I found an untouched cot near the kitchen and sat, laces untied, mud flaking to the floor. My eyelids fluttered. Somewhere distant, Rachel laughed, unfiltered, unguarded. Mom's humming flowed in and out. Dad's calculator keys clicked in a syncopated lullaby. My inner monologue whispered, "It's not finished. There's funding to secure, bylaws to revise, trauma to process." Yet for the first time, caution didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a compass pointing toward long work and longer hope, work we would do together. I drifted, not quite asleep, when the radio chirped. Jake's voice, quiet, urgent, threaded into my half-dream. "Emma, you'll want to hear this. The mayor's office just called." I sat up, heart stuttering. "Go ahead." "They're organizing a citywide fundraiser next month, spotlighting recovery efforts. They want your nonprofit to headline." A pause. "Your family too, front and center." My pulse quickened. Not fear this time, but the dizzy rush of a horizon cracking open. I laced my boots, wiped grit from my eyes, and headed back to the war room, toward the future that had finally tilted in our favor, but still needed steady hands to guide it. Because reconciliation is more than apology. It's action, commitment, repetition. And tomorrow would test whether our new understanding could survive the slow, difficult work of rebuilding. 6 months after the flood, the community center smelled like fresh paint and pine-scented floor polish. The same building where families had huddled together on borrowed cots now gleamed with warm lights, polished floors, and walls covered in framed photos from that night. Not the ones from the news stations, the real ones. Volunteers laughing, kids coloring on tarp floors, my mom serving soup in a borrowed sweater, Rachel taping storm maps to the wall. One photo hung near the entrance. Jake and I hauling sandbags in the rain, my face half lit by lightning. Tonight, the center wasn't a shelter. It was a celebration. Outside, the early summer breeze curled through the Blue Ridge Mountains, rustling new leaves and lifting the edges of the banner that stretched across the building's entry. Rebuild, remember, resilience. Inside, the tables were dressed in deep blue cloths, each centerpiece a repurposed sandbag ringed with wildflowers. On stage, a small acoustic band tuned their guitars, and laughter rippled across the room like a tide. I stood by the punch table, sipping lemonade and watching it all come together. 6 months ago, I'd walked into this place with my spine tight, my jaw clenched, bracing for another round of subtle judgment and polite dismissal. But now, something had shifted, not just in my family, but in me. Jake approached with 2 plastic cups and that crooked half-smile that always made my chest tighten, in ways I didn't fully understand until the flood taught me how fast everything could be lost. "You pacing or admiring?" he asked. I smirked. "I haven't decided yet." He nodded toward the east wall, now lined with display boards showcasing our nonprofit's evolution. "You've got real traction, Emma. City Council approved the second training site, and the school board wants your prep curriculum next semester." I blinked. "Already?" He grinned. "People tend to trust the woman who kept the water out and the power on." Just then, the MC's voice rose over the sound system. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we recognize the people who stood tallest when the water rose highest. Let's begin with the reason we're all here, the Asheville Disaster Response Initiative. Please welcome its founder and director, Emma Carter." Applause filled the room, unhurried and strong. I stepped onto the stage. No notes, no slideshow. Just me. Spotlight warmed my shoulders as I scanned the room, faces I'd seen muddy, frightened, brave, and others, new donors, city officials, curious strangers, leaned in, wondering how a little nonprofit had pulled off something a city budget hadn't. I took a breath. 6 months ago, I began. This room was full of fear, not just because of the flood, but because we didn't know if we could trust each other. Strangers slept shoulder to shoulder, unsure of what tomorrow looked like. We didn't know who had the answers, or if any existed. I paused. My voice dropped. But something happened. People stepped forward, not because they were paid, not because anyone told them to, but because they couldn't sit still. A few nods from the front row. Sarah from the pharmacy. James, the teenager who hauled blankets until 3 a.m., the retired mechanic who used garden hoses to siphon floodwater from the basement. I watched my sister organize medicine logs, I continued, my eyes finding Rachel, seated near the front, clapping slowly, proudly. I watched my parents serve soup to strangers and manage our supply chain like it was Fort Knox. Mom beamed. Dad folded his arms, his grin tugging wide. We weren't just responding to a disaster, I said. We were learning who we were without all the distractions. We learned what resilience looks like when no one's watching, and that's what tonight is about. I stepped aside as the MC returned, but I caught Rachel's whisper as I passed. That was exactly right. Later, near the display boards, Dad stood with two men from the local credit union, pointing to a laminated photo of our rescue boats. She trained volunteers on her own time, he said, voice full of awe, ran simulations with no budget, kept inventory in her apartment closet. I nearly choked on my punch. When I passed him, he reached into his pocket and handed me a small frame. Inside, a printout of an op-ed he'd submitted to the Asheville Citizen-Times titled, "My Daughter, the Responder, Why the City Should Fund Her Work Year-Round." "I wanted something for your new office," he said. This felt overdue. I stared at the piece. The words visionary, strategist, and leader all leapt out. It wasn't pride that hit me. It was release, like I could finally stop holding my breath. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. He just nodded. "That's okay. You already said it." In the far corner, I spotted Mom speaking to a group of women from her co-op. She was passing out flyers, my flyers. Disaster readiness for single moms, budget prep kits, neighborhood CPR training. She caught my eye and winked. Across the room, Rachel clinked glasses with a councilwoman. I walked over and found her mid-pitch. "We're adding legal advocacy for low-income families impacted by environmental emergencies," she said smoothly. "Emma's team does the groundwork, and my firm's covering the pro bono legal services." The councilwoman raised an impressed eyebrow. "Ambitious." Rachel just smiled. "That's how my sister does it." Later, I wandered out to the parking lot for air. The mountains framed the skyline like sentinels. The stars had started to break through the cloud cover. Jake joined me, his coat draped over one arm. "You know," he said, "you changed the whole conversation in this town." I shook my head. "We did." He stepped closer. "But you started it. When no one was listening, when they called it a hobby or a waste. You started it anyway." The silence between us was full. Heavy with what had been lost, yes, but also with what we'd made from it. "I've been offered a regional coordinator role," he added, watching my reaction. "Disaster resilience across the Appalachian corridor. Starts next quarter." I stiffened, heart dipping. "That's incredible," I said, trying to smile. He searched my face. "But I don't want to leave Asheville unless it makes sense. For both of us." My chest tightened. "We don't have to decide now," he added. "I just wanted you to know I'm not going anywhere unless you ask me to." I nodded, breath catching on 1,000 things I wasn't ready to say. "I'll think about it," I murmured. The wind tugged at my hair. Somewhere behind us, music started again, and then the mayor's aide appeared at the door, calling across the lot. "Emma, there's someone here who wants to see you. Says it's urgent." I frowned. "Who?" The aide glanced at a clipboard. "A woman from a national nonprofit alliance. She says she's been following your work since the flood." Jake raised an eyebrow. "Sounds big." My pulse kicked. "Be right there." I turned toward the building, heart pounding, not with fear, but with possibility. Maybe it was the beginning of a bigger mission, and maybe everything was about to change again. Sunlight spills into Asheville Civic Auditorium, catching motes of dust that sway above polished exhibit panels titled "Before the Flood" and "After." 6 months have passed, but the copper scent of river water lingers in my memory like a ghost. Today is our first citywide resilience summit, and the name at the top of every agenda reads, Emma Carter, Director, Asheville Disaster Response Initiative. I flatten my badge, feeling the embossed letters beneath my thumb. Across the aisle, Jake flashes a thumbs-up, regional coordinator patch bright on his jacket. I breathe in the room's mix of fresh varnish and nervous anticipation, let it settle in my lungs, and step to the podium. Preparedness starts long before sirens, I tell the crowd. Officials, teachers, scout troops, my parents in the front row. Slides flicker behind me. Solar radio towers, youth sandbag drills, legal clinics Rachel now runs pro bono. I measure every sentence, remembering how each statistic hides a heartbeat. When I finish, applause rises. Steady, grounded. Dad wipes his eyes. Mom clasps the locket that now holds a photo of me in rain-slick gear. Rachel mouths nailed it. The affirmation lands gently. I no longer need it, but I welcome it. Outside, the late spring sky is Carolina blue, yet flood markers still gleam on lampposts, quiet exclamation points. We gather at the new memorial, steel hands lifting from stylized waves. Volunteers' names spiral around the base, Grandma B's nodding crew among them. I trace the cool metal of her name and feel a tender ache, equal parts sorrow and pride. Jake hands me coffee. The National Alliance emailed again, he says, arching a brow. They want you on their advisory board. I sip, steam curling between us. I'll accept, if headquarters stays here. Local hero, national reach, he murmurs, clinking his cup to mine. Evening drapes the mountains purple as we return to the community center, reborn in paint the color of dawn. Tonight's fundraiser hums with blue-covered tables and centerpieces fashioned from cleaned sandbags and wildflowers. A banner reads, Rebuild. Remember, resilience. I circulate, thanking donors, hugging volunteers, swapping storm stories already becoming folklore. Dad corners a banker about low-interest emergency loans. Mom signs up families for her preparedness classes. Rachel convinces a councilwoman to endorse statewide volunteer immunity statutes. Watching them, I feel something lock into place, as if the earth itself finally agrees I belong here. Near the exit, a woman with brisk heels and an agency badge pulls me aside. National Alliance of Resilience, she says. Your work changed our funding model. We've approved 3 satellite sites, if you'll lead. My pulse lifts, but my voice stays even. Only if each site trains locals to command their own response. No parachute leadership. She grins. That's why we want you. A letter bearing a gold seal slides into my hand. Later, on the front steps, I inhale honeysuckle and distant rain, the gentle kind. Post-event cleanup stretches past midnight. I stay to sweep confetti from the corners, broom bristles whispering over varnish. My feet throb, but each stroke feels like a prayer, collecting bright fragments of celebration so tomorrow begins on clear ground. Dad insists on driving the last box of medical gloves to the clinic. Mom double-checks every light switch. When the doors finally lock, a hush settles so deep I can hear my own pulse. We caravan home in Jake's truck, headlights painting the road in silver ribbons. At the Carter driveway, the porch swing still hangs where I left it years ago. But tonight, its chains glint newly oiled. Inside, the air smells of cinnamon and cedar polish. Mom set out 3 mugs of chamomile, steam curling like question marks. We sit at the kitchen table, elbows touching in companionable exhaustion. Dad scoops sugar with an accountant's precision, yet his voice is soft. I used to think success meant stock portfolios, he says, stirring slowly. But a safe town feels like a better return. His eyes meet mine. No fireworks, just steady acknowledgement that lands deeper than applause. Upstairs, my childhood bedroom holds cardboard boxes labeled Museum of Emma's Experiments. Test tubes, science fair ribbons, the grant rejection letters I once hid. I run my fingers along the soft edges and realize none of it feels like failure anymore. It feels like groundwork. That evening, we reopen the doors for the fundraiser's final session. I raise a glass. Conversation hushes. 6 months ago, water filled this room. We thought we'd lost everything. Instead, we found each other. Tonight, we've raised enough to fund 2 more radio towers and 70 volunteer kits. Tomorrow, we keep going, because storms don't wait for perfect timing, and neither should hope. You don't measure worth by the salary column or the applause meter. You measure it by lives touched, fears quieted, futures made possible. If someone calls your dream a waste, remember Asheville. Ordinary hands can build extraordinary safety nets. Faces shine, some tear-streaked, some grinning. Mom dabs her eyes, then starts a standing ovation. Dad whistles off-key. I laugh, full, unguarded. After dessert, Rachel finds me by the mural of that night. Remember when Dad compared your nonprofit to a lemonade stand, she teases. Best lemonade in town, I reply. We share a smile that tastes like forgiveness. My phone buzzes, a comment on our latest preparedness video. Your checklist saved my family during the tornado. Thank you. A glowing reminder that impact travels farther than floodwaters. Jake joins us, hand warm on my back. Ready for what's next, director? The title no longer feels borrowed. It feels earned. I look at my family, at volunteers stacking leftover food for the shelter, at flood markers glinting beyond the windows. Ready, I say, because legacy isn't a statue or a headline, it's a relay. Tonight, I pass the baton to everyone who believes change begins with one prepared heart, and my job is to keep running, hand outstretched. Lesson. Story message. Your value isn't declared by others. It's proven by the lives you lift and the hope you refuse to surrender. Start where you stand, use what you have, and let impact speak louder than doubt. Call to action. If this story moved you, share your own below. Tell us how you turned skepticism into service, how you've prepared for the storms ahead. Hit like, subscribe for more real-life resilience, and forward this video to anyone who needs proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. One sandbag, one flashlight, one open door at a time. Together, we're the high ground.